Marshal Sovetskogo Soyuza, Marshal of the Soviet Union. There are only a handful of you. Fewer than 10 men hold this rank at any point in the war. The highest in the Soviet military, standing at the interface of the political world and the military one, which in the Soviet system is the most dangerous place in the entire command structure. You are Marshal Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov, born in 1896 in the Kaluga region, son of a cobbler, risen through the Imperial Army, the Red Army, the Purges, and the most destructive war in human history to become the officer most responsible for Germany's defeat. You commanded the defense of Moscow in December 1941, when ministries had already evacuated east, when the city seemed hours from falling. You stayed. You organized the counter-offensive using Siberian divisions transferred from the Far East, arriving by train through minus 40-degree cold and going directly into the assault. It was the first major German defeat of the entire war. You planned Operation Uranus at Stalingrad, the double envelopment that trapped the German 6th Army in November 1942. You briefed it to Stalin personally, argued for it against skepticism, and watched it close with near-mathematical precision. You commanded the First Belarusian Front during Operation Bagration in summer 1944, the offensive that destroyed Army Group Center and eliminated 500,000 German soldiers in 8 weeks, a catastrophe larger than anything in the Western memory of the war and largely invisible in the post-war Western narrative. And in April 1945, you took Berlin. The burden of the rank is not combat decisions. Combat you can manage. The burden is Stalin. Every major plan required his approval. He understood politics. He understood terror. And he had instinct for broad strategy. But he interfered in operational detail in ways that cost lives. You argued with him when he was wrong. Twice, you argued directly enough that men of lesser standing would have disappeared. You did not disappear because he needed you more than he feared you. And because you had the specific courage of a man who knows he is the only one in the room who can do what the room requires. You accepted Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945 in Berlin. The war in Europe was over. The Soviet Union had suffered approximately 27 million total deaths, military and civilian combined. A number so large, the human mind doesn't process it as a number. It processes it as a territory of loss. You walked out of the surrender ceremony, and you looked at the city that had organized all of this. This empire of deliberate slaughter, this machinery built from categories and ideology and hatred, consuming an entire continent. You thought of Kaluga, of the village, of the cobbler's son, who somehow became the man standing here in a city his country bled to reach, signing the end of a war that had no parallel in the history of human catastrophe. You had given an order that morning. You would give one the next morning. There was no clean moment of conclusion, no silence that matched the scale of what had just ended. History would give you a victory parade through Red Square in June 1945, where captured German battle standards were thrown at the base of Lenin's mausoleum. You would ride a white horse. The crowd would be enormous. None of it would feel like enough. Because it wasn't enough. The math of what was lost doesn't balance against anything. It just sits there, permanent and unanswerable, for the rest of your life. That is what it was like to be at the top of the Soviet military in the Second World War. Not glory. Responsibility so total it became its own gravity. A weight that never fully lifts. Not even then. General Mayor, Major General. You command a corps or serve as a senior army staff officer. Your war is conducted through radio nets and command maps spread across tables in farmhouses and moving trucks. You have not fired a weapon in combat in 2 years. This is correct. Your weapon now is the operational plan. Major General Fyodor Karpov, Frunze Military Academy before the war, where the theory of modern military command was taught against doctrine that 1941 would invalidate almost immediately. You spent the first years reconstructing everything you thought you knew at the highest possible cost. The Red Army at corps level is now executing what historians will call deep battle, an operational concept developed by theorists like Mikhail Tukhachevsky in the 1930s, suppressed during the Purge, and recovered through 4 years of bloody experimentation. The idea: attack simultaneously across the entire depth of the enemy's system, not just the front line, but the reserves, logistics, and headquarters, so that no part of the defense can reinforce any other. It requires coordination at scale. It requires an army capable of thinking operationally. You are now that army. You sit across from the army commander in a planning session that has been running 6 hours. The operation will cut off 3 German divisions, 2 corps converging from different axes, linking up 40 kilometers behind the German front. A pocket. Inside it, a 3rd corps presses forward so the trapped forces cannot organize a breakout. You've done this before. Stalingrad, The Corson Pocket in early 1944. The destruction of Army Group Center. Each time, more efficiently. Thought you worked the staff problem. Road conditions for 60,000 men and their fuel. Artillery concentrations for day one. Air coordination. Engineer river crossings. Signal architecture. Medical evacuation. Logistics. This is General Officer Command, not heroism. Administration at scale, against a thinking enemy, under time pressure. The operation executes. The pocket closes. 43,000 German soldiers are captured or killed. Your corps takes 7,200 casualties. You write the after-action report. You note 3 things that could have gone better. You ensure they are corrected before the next operation. There is always a next operation. Until suddenly, there isn't. Polkovnik. Colonel. You command a division. 10 to 12,000 men. Better equipped and better led than anything the Red Army fielded in 1941. Operating with a sophistication that would have seemed impossible in that first catastrophic year. You are a general in everything but rank. Colonel Vasily Gromov. Career officer. You survived the purge of 1937 to 38, which is its own kind of accomplishment. Junior enough not to be threatening. Careful enough to keep your name off the wrong documents. You are not bitter. You don't have the bandwidth for bitterness. You spent the war learning what the purged commanders never got to teach you through the most expensive method available, and now you carry all of it. Your division is part of the 1st Belarusian Front, Marshal Zhukov's command, in the final drive on Berlin. The operational picture is compression. The German state is physically shrinking. Armies that once held thousands of kilometers now crammed into a corridor, fighting not for strategic objectives, but for time. You receive your axis of advance and your artillery allocation. Massive. Unprecedented quantities that Soviet industry built up over 4 years of manufacturing east of the Urals, outproducing Germany in tanks, guns, and aircraft from 1943 onward. This is what it feels like from the inside. Every assault now has steel behind it. You designate your main effort, assign your best regiment to the hardest positions, build in reserve flexibility, coordinate left and right with adjacent divisions. You submit the plan. It is approved. You execute. Standing at your command post on the outskirts of Berlin in April 1945, you allow yourself one moment, something close to awe, looking west at the city that cost so many of your men to reach. Then, you pick up the field telephone and ask the artillery regiment if it's ready. It says yes. You say good. The business continues. Podpolkovnik, Lieutenant Colonel, you command a regiment. 3 battalions, supporting arms, 3,000 men on paper, and around 1,800 functional. You know every officer by name and record. The men you know in aggregate. You trust your battalion commanders to carry your intent into their lives. Your horizon is measured in kilometers now. You think about phase lines, sequencing of battalion attacks, so each one enables the next. Artillery timing, the condition of the supply route, the weight of ammunition your regiment burns through in a single sustained day. You are Lieutenant Colonel Pyotr Nikitin. You came up through the worst years. You survived the first winter outside Moscow when most of your contemporaries did not. Stalin's purge of the officer corps between 1937 and 1938 had gutted the military's leadership. Roughly 35,000 officers removed, including 3 of the 5 marshals and most of the senior command. The army went to war, hollowed out. You spent 4 years filling the void through the most expensive possible method, and now everything you learned lives in your head every time you open a map. It is spring 1945. You are in Poland, moving toward the Oder. The mood in the regiment is complicated. There is ferocity built from years of accumulated grief. Every man has lost something irreplaceable. There is also exhaustion. 4 years of sleeping in holes and eating whatever could be found. You keep your officers focused on the task. You do not allow the ferocity to become disorder. Disorder costs lives. The Oder crossing is 200 meters of open water under fire. Engineers will bridge it. Your lead battalion crosses in assault boats. You follow with the second once a bridgehead is established. You have walked through this sequence every day for a week. The crossing begins at 0200. Your lead battalion takes casualties in the boats, expected, and consolidates the near bank. By dawn, the bridgehead is 400 meters deep. Not secure, but enough. You cross. You expand. Berlin is 80 kilometers away. You don't know that yet. You know only the bridgehead, the morning light, and the next order waiting to be given. But somewhere in the back of your mind, in a place you don't examine while there's still work to do, is the memory of a frozen trench in 1941, where you told yourself this was still possible, that the line could hold, that the country could absorb this and keep fighting, that the man next to you and the man next to him and the 10 million men behind them, all adding up to something that couldn't be stopped. You believed it then. It turns out that mattered. Major. You run a battalion. 500 men on paper, around 380, effective after months of continuous operations. For the first time in your career, you have a staff. Operations, intelligence, logistics, or a political officer. You hold meetings, you review plans. You are more planner than fighter now, though the distinction can vanish in 30 seconds. Major Oleg Berezin. You came up through the cavalry, transferred to rifle infantry, when the mechanized failures of 1941 forced a reorganization. You made yourself into exactly that. Soviet intelligence is sharper now. In 1941, it was frequently wrong, frequently late, and often suppressed by officers afraid to report honestly upward. The informational failure was catastrophic. By 1944, partisan networks operating behind German lines, organized and supplied by Moscow, are delivering precise reports on German logistics, positions, and strength. The picture has changed. You are in Ukraine, part of the offensive, rolling the German line steadily west. Operation Bagration, launched in June 1944 in Belarusia, has already destroyed Army Group Center, the single most catastrophic German defeat of the war. Your sector is not the main effort, but your pressure prevents German reserves from shifting to where they are needed. You are the hinge. Your battalion's task is to seize a crossroads anchoring the German left flank. Not glamorous. But if you fail, the division's flanking maneuver is exposed. You position your companies, coordinate your mortar fires, confirm communications with the regiment on your right. Then you wait. When the order comes, you move forward. Close enough to read the battle, far enough back not to die in the first 30 seconds. A discipline 2 years in the making. The crossroads is taken by 1400. You begin defensive preparations immediately, and the Germans will counterattack. They always do. You position your weapons, orient your machine guns, register your mortars on the likely approach routes. You will hold because the plan requires it, and because holding crossroads is how the rest of the war pivots. The division's success tonight depends on yours. You know this. Your men don't need to. Capitan, captain, you command a company. 120 men at full strength, which means whatever number is currently functional, ranging this past year from 84 to 41 and back up. You have stopped learning replacements' names in the first week. It is not callousness. It is a form of protection you hate yourself for needing. You are Captain Alexei Morozov, 3rd Company, 1st Battalion, 37th Guards Rifle Division. The Guards designation was earned, better equipment, steadier resupply, and a reputation that carries its own weight. You carry it. Your job sits at the hinge between tactical and operational. Platoon leaders fight the immediate battle. The battalion commander shapes the broader scheme, while you translate between the two. The gap between what an order assumes and what the ground allows is often enormous. You live in that gap. By 1943, the Red Army is converting hard experience into professional power. The encirclement and destruction of the German 6th Army at Stalingrad in February changed the war's psychological mathematics. German forces were now visibly capable of collapse. That knowledge moves through the Red Army like a current. You are planning an assault on a German-held village northwest of Kursk, July 1943. You've walked the ground at night and memorized the drainage ditch 30 meters in front of the German wire. That ditch gives your leading platoon cover for the final approach. You brief your commanders in a collapsed farmhouse using a hand-drawn sketch. You explain the plan twice, answer every question. Then tell them what to do when it breaks. Because it always breaks, and the unit that keeps moving after is the unit that wins. At 0400, behind a 10-minute artillery barrage, you advance. The ditch works. The wire is cut. You are inside the German position before they can fully react. By 0520, the village is yours. 14 casualties. 2 dead, 12 wounded. By the standards of this war, exceptional. This is how the Red Army is improving. Not through genius alone, but through the slow accumulation of what works, recorded and passed upward, absorbed and reapplied. You are one node in that system, an important one. Lieutenant, you went to school for this. 12 weeks at the accelerated officer course in Chelyabinsk, where the academies had been evacuated when the Germans drove toward Moscow. Tactics, political instruction, map reading, and a recurring emphasis on personal example. The Soviet belief that an officer leads from the front and demonstrates courage as a direct act of command. Personal example has a steep casualty rate. You command a platoon, 30 to 40 men, depending on what the week has done to your numbers. You are responsible for their movement, their morale, their political reliability. You find that rations and honest information about the objective tend to work better than ideology for the last part. You are in Stalingrad, October 1942. This city is no longer a city. It is a geological feature of rubble and fire. Every building is a fortification. Every floor is a separate battle. Your men have developed a tactic they call hugging the enemy, staying so close to German positions that German artillery cannot fire without hitting their own troops. You advance into the enemy. You make their advantage your shield. You run your platoon across the open ground between the burned-out tractor factory and the apartment block to its east. 12 seconds of exposure. You go first because you have to. Half the platoon makes it. 3 men don't. You don't stop to look back. Looking back stops the movement, and the movement is the only thing keeping the forward men alive. Inside the block, your men take the first floor. No lights, hand signals only. A German section holds the second. For 3 days, you trade grenades up and down a staircase. You eat cold tinned fish and sleep in 90-minute shifts. When it's over, the building is yours. The letters home are censored. You write that you are well and the cause is just and the men are determined. All true enough that it doesn't feel like a lie. You don't write about the staircase. Some things are not for letters. Some things you won't say out loud for 30 years. If you survive to have 30 years, you will. Before we go further, if you've made it this far, comment what you want next. She hit that like button right now and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We upload every single day. Mladší Sergeant, Junior Sergeant. You have been promoted. It happened less because of merit and more because everyone above you was dead. That's not cynicism. That is literally how it worked in 1942. Or a junior sergeant led 4 to 7 men, the smallest tactical unit that could function with any coordination. You were given a stripe on your collar tab and responsibility for men who were in the same condition you were 6 weeks ago. Confused, cold, and statistically unlikely to see spring. Your name is Volkov. You grew up in Tula, south of Moscow, where the great arms factories made Mosin Nagants and Tokarev pistols. When the Germans reached the outskirts of Tula in November 1941, your father, too old for conscription, joined the civilian militia that dug anti-tank ditches with regular shovels. The city held. You think about that sometimes. Ordinary men with shovels, stopping panzer divisions. The most Soviet thing you've ever heard. Your job is to keep your section alive long enough to be useful. You eat last. As you check that wounds are dressed, that weapons are clear of ice, that nobody has gone still in the cold for reasons other than sleep. You don't get maps or briefings. You get an objective. Take that house, hold that crossroads, and you figure out how to make it happen. Tonight, you're clearing a village that has changed hands 3 times in 4 days. Your section moves wall to wall in short bounds, covering each other the way instinct eventually replaces training when training runs out. You find a German machine gun position in the ruins of a granary. You don't deliberate. The section moves. The position is gone. You keep moving. 6 men. You know each of them by the way they move under fire. Who freezes for a half second, who rushes too fast. You have corrected every tendency over the past several weeks. What, you have turned 6 frightened men into a unit that functions. Nothing is written about this. Nobody medals you for it. But the 6 men are alive, and tomorrow you will do this again in a different village with a different name. You are 24 years old. You have aged 11 years since June. Ryadovoy. Private. You are nobody. That is not an insult. That is simply where it begins. You were conscripted in the summer of 1941 from a village in the Ural region so small it didn't appear on most military maps. You had never fired a rifle before the army handed you one. In some cases, they didn't hand you one at all. You were told to follow the man in front of you, and when he fell, to pick up his weapon. That was the training. Operation Barbarossa. The German invasion, launched on June 22nd, had shattered entire Soviet armies in weeks. The Wehrmacht moved so fast that whole divisions were encircled before commanders even knew the front had collapsed. You were fed into this chaos as a Ryadovoy, the lowest rank in the Soviet military structure. You were 22. Some of the men beside you were 17. Your uniform was a khaki gymnasтерка tunic that didn't quite fit. Your kit was a canvas bag, a mess tin, and an ammunition allotment that was frequently less than theoretical. You carried a Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifle, 5 rounds per cycle, a weapon older than your grandfather. The men called it the 3-line. You called it everything you had. The Eastern Front did not look like war was supposed to look. It looked like mud and tree lines and the permanent absence of sleep. It looked like orders that arrived after they were already obsolete. It looked like a commissar behind the line reminding you that order number 227, Stalin's not one step back directive, meant exactly what it said. When men ran, they were shot. The system was built so that forward was the only direction without consequences. Tonight, your platoon holds a railroad embankment outside Rhehev. January, -30 for 6 days. You have no winter boots. Those went to the wrong sector. You've wrapped your feet in cloth torn from a dead man's coat. You are not warm, but you are standing, which tonight is the same thing as winning. The German positions are 400 meters east. Occasionally, a flare goes up, and turns the snowfield white and bright as daylight. You do not move when the flares go up. You are learning everything in real time in the worst classroom ever built. You will survive this night. You will not survive the next push. Or you will survive the push and not survive the winter. Or you will survive both and end up somewhere worse, a place called Stalingrad, where survival becomes its own kind of madness. You don't know yet. Right now, you know only the embankment, the cold, and the man to your left, whose name is Dmitri, who has not spoken in 2 days and whose silence you have decided to interpret as focus rather than fear, because the alternative is not useful. The Ryadovoy didn't win this war in heroic strokes. He won it by not dying long enough for something to shift. By the time it did, roughly 8.7 million Soviet military personnel had been killed. The Ryadovoy accounted for most of that number. History doesn't always leave room for the ones who held the line with nothing. It should.